Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Gardener's Question Time. I'm Rebecca from Stock Free Farming, and in case you missed the blurb, tonight we have a special topic, and it is leaf protein concentrate, also known as leaf concentrate or leaf curd or LEAFU. So LEAFU is the concentrated form of the protein found in the leaves of plants. So why is LEAFU important or relevant to Gardener's Question Time? Well, I think given the rising cost of food, which we're all familiar with right now, and also the shortages of food that we're faced with, LEAFU is the most abundant and the cheapest form of protein that we have. It can be made from any edible, non-toxic leaves, yes, even from weeds. So as a vegan, when people ask you that question, where do you get your protein? You can literally say, I get it from the roadside. So in my garden, I've made LEAFU from nettles, garlic mustard, wild garlic, dandelions, ground elder, and other plants too. So I first heard of LEAFU when I listened to a podcast by Robin Harford, who is the guru of foraging, and he was interviewing Michael Cole. Michael was one of the experts or the expert and producer of LEAFU in the UK. And sadly, Michael is no longer with us, but tonight on the show, we have his wonderful daughter, Ella. She's having Wi-Fi problems a wee bit, but hopefully Ella can make an appearance, who has taken over from Michael. As an organization, Stock Free Farming, we were incredibly excited a couple of years ago to meet Dr. David Lawson from SRUC. David is researching making LEAFU from white clover and grass. So this presents, an exciting, viable alternative to farmers who have pasture land, that they could actually produce this high quality plant protein for human consumption directly from the clover and grass, instead of having to pass it through the body of a cow or a sheep. So at Stock Free Farming, where we help farmers transition to fairer, greener, kinder livelihoods, that's a really exciting prospect. So along the way, we've also met Jenny and John Davis, who, along with their father before them, have been engaged in research and promoting leaf protein concentrate, particularly looking at it as a cure for micronutrient deficiencies in people overseas in more developing countries. And last but not least, the wonderful Grace Duane, who is a master's student in innovative design engineering. It might also be divine, at Imperial College in London. And currently for her master's project, Grace is designing a domestic leaf protein extraction device. So enough of me. I am not a LEAFU expert, but I'm a LEAFU enthusiast, in case you can't tell. So I'd like to introduce you to the panel. I'm going to have the panel introduce themselves one by one and say what their LEAFU interest is, and then we'll move on to the questions. And we have loads of questions, so I think it's going to be an exciting evening. So who wants to go first?
Okay, hi there. Hello, everyone. As Rebecca mentioned, I'm David Lawson from SRUC, which is Scotland's Rural College. I'm based in Perth in Scotland this evening. And Scotland's Rural College, for anyone who doesn't know, it's the main sort of educational research and consultancy organisation in all aspects of land management in Scotland, and has over 1,100 members of staff, so it's quite a large organisation. My own role within the SRUC is to look after grassland management, both in terms of education and research. And over 7-8 years ago, I became interested in the concept of extracting protein from grass and clover, as Rebecca mentioned. I've been working on that over the past 7 or 8 years now. The main aim of actually getting an economical product, which can be then marketed for human consumption, without going through the animal. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thanks, David. Yeah. Next.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Rebecca, for the lovely introduction. I'm Grace, and I'm studying innovation design engineering, as Rebecca mentioned, and my interest in LEAFU came while I was searching for my master's project, I was actually raised vegetarian, and then we later transitioned as a family to veganism when I was about 7 years old. So veganism and finding protein substitutes, it has been really close to my heart all my life. So I was really excited to find out that I can make my own protein at home, essentially from weeds, from plants in my garden. So that's been a really exciting journey for me. And at the moment, I am developing a domestic leaf protein concentrate extraction device, which I hope can help encourage people to make their own leaf protein concentrate at home in a very easy and efficient way.
Thanks very much, Grace. Great. Who's up next?
Hi. Hello, Rebecca. Thank you. And hello, everyone. I'm Jenny Davis, and I am the daughter of Glyn Davis, who in the 60s was involved as an engineer in making machinery to help, well, to produce leaf concentrate, as they called it then, or leaf protein, because the main thing that they were looking for was the protein at that time, at Rothamsted Experimental Station in Hertfordshire. And I was a toddler, and I would go into his lab, and I learned how to wash my hands properly and how to eat fresh leaf curd out of the press. And I heard constantly throughout my childhood and throughout my growing up, and got involved with some of the work that my dad did with Find Your Feet, which was a charity that helped, run by Carol Martin, who was an amazingly charismatic woman who saw the potential for leaf protein in helping people in the developing world. She was a very altruistic and philanthropic person and wanted to help people who were suffering from nutritional deficiency around the world. And rather than plumpy nuts, we always thought that, which is a very common and very expensive protein supplement for people who are malnourished in the developing world, we always hoped that leaf curd might be seen for the wonderful food it is. And what Dad was involved with was helping people on the ground, Indigenous people, to use Indigenous leaves and create in small village scale situations their own leaf protein sources. And they conducted many trials showing the incredible potential for this food: high protein, high vitamin A, iron. And the difference, I remember my dad coming back just beaming with happiness at the difference in the children that he would see with things like beriberi and terrible malnutrition. And just after a few weeks, their eyes would be bright. They would be full of life and energy. Same happened with pregnant women, lactating women. And they've recently done some trials with people who suffering from HIV in certain countries in Africa, and seeing the help that leaf concentrate can make with immunity and the recovery from illness. So there's a lot of potential, I think, for this food. And in terms of veganism and sustainability and ecological contribution to the world at this terrible point, and I feel like this is a resource that needs to be accessed. And what Grace is doing is fantastic. And I just wish that the government, as it did during wartime, World War II, it gave money to research leaf protein, creating it, because the government thought that we might be blockaded and that we wouldn't have enough protein, we wouldn't be able to import protein. So we had the person that my dad first worked with was Professor Bill Pirrie in Rothamsted, and he had been commissioned he was a biochemist, and he'd been commissioned to create to produce leaf curd. But then we won the war and everyone forgot about it. But now seems to be the time, I think, as people's interest in veganism and in more sustainable ways of using the land. The need for it seems so much more urgent. That's
Great.
me waffling. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, Jenny. Thank you.
Is it me next?
I think we've got John. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Right, so I just got down it. Right, hello everyone. Thank you, Rebecca. Yes. Well, my sister Jen, who's just spoken, said a lot of the background things. I sort of, after doing mechanical engineering degree, spent a year in Nicaragua running a project with to try to help women's co-ops develop leaf concentrate as an income source. And some of the things that we encountered there, some things we found, like certainly everything Jen said about the sort of the nutritional benefits, I witnessed firsthand. As far as sort of some of the social change involved, and that's maybe something like sort of we can chat about later on. I mean, there are so yes, those are some of the practical problems of implementing and developing stuff are things that we can talk about later on. But since then, really my interest over the last few years, has been about how we could develop leaf concentrate as in a social enterprise to raise funds for nutrition programs, and that has been my most recent interest and something that I'm still looking into. And it's very exciting to come across Rebecca and David and Grace and Ella and so on. Well, I think yes, Ella sort of recontacting, isn't it, from a very, very long time ago. So I'll end there, and yes, more will come in, I'm sure, as we go tonight.
Great, thank you, John. Is Ella going to be able to join us, Dan? I'm not sure if Ella's coming in or not.
We just got a message saying that her interest, yeah, her internet unfortunately is not managing to keep up with that, unfortunately. I've just seen
oh, that's too bad. Anyway,
I forgot to say that our dad worked very closely with Michael Cole on Ella, the machinery that Ella's been using, and yeah, it was an amazing partnership, I think.
Oh, fantastic.
Michael's work is amazing. I just it's wonderful that Ella's carrying it on,
isn't it? It's wonderful. Yeah, down in Devon, right? Isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, well, thanks everyone. So interesting, isn't it? Well, we'll go ahead with the questions now. So, I mean, I think the first question you've kind of covered, Jenny covered it when she was speaking, but I think it would be good to recap this question for those who are listening. What are the main attributes and nutritional qualities of LEAFU? So maybe we could list those, whoever wants to jump in there.
Shall I say a little bit?
Yeah, go on, John.
Okay. Okay. David, sorry, did you want to say?
Oh, well, just very quickly. I mean, obviously, the main aspect of it has been extracting protein and getting a high protein product. I mean, some of the products could be produced with about 60% protein, even higher within them, depending on the plants and what the method used. But the other aspects, I'm sure John will say a lot more about this, is the fact it tends to be very high in essential micronutrients, especially iron tends to be very high in them. So this is obviously very interesting for nutritional aspects. The other things that there's usually some fiber present, some sugar present as well, and other minerals as well.
Thank you. Anything to add, John or Jenny, to that?
Just a very little bit. As Jen said, back in the 50s and the 60s, there was a big concentration on protein. But in recent years, as David alluded to, that the micronutrients have come to the fore, and beta carotene, like precursor of vitamin A, like the leaf concentrate, certainly has been found to be certain the lucerne stuff, and possibly from other plants. And I don't see really why it should vary much depending on the plant, but I don't know. There's been a very strong sort of that I found yes, that's been a sort of a very strong element of it. And I think another thing that has been found is that it's natural combinations of micronutrients as opposed to the artificial ones have just seemed to be a lot more effective than, say, giving people iron tablets or vitamin A tablets and so on. If you take it from a natural source, then the effect is much greater. And it seems to be something about the particular combination of nutrients in leaf concentrate that seems to have quite a, what seems to be quite a miraculous effect at times. So yes, there's still more to learn, I think.
Yeah, thank you, John. The next question is asking about the protein content, and David, you just mentioned that some leaves have a protein content up to 60%. The question is, does all LEAFU have around a 50% protein content, or are some leaves better than others? Some leaves have a higher protein content, some have a lower protein content.
Yeah, well, I'll just start off. Yeah, just generally speaking, leguminous plants will have a higher protein content to begin with. So the leaf you end up with is going to have a higher protein content. And also, it's just easier because it means the concentration of protein is higher to begin with. So it's actually easier to extract that protein into the concentrate. So yes, they will vary from species to species, but certainly leguminous plants, beans. I mean, I've been working, you mentioned, Rebecca, working on white clover, which is significantly higher protein content than grass, and that's why we use it within the mix.
Yeah, great, thank you. Anybody, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I also believe that the protein content will depend on the part of the life cycle that you harvest a leaf. So I believe that young to mid-cycle leaves, they contain higher proteins, but as the leaf gets older, it might the protein content might diminish a bit. But yeah, I think it depends on the cycle as well of harvest.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? So young leaves, yeah, great. And somebody's asking, is there a list of edible plants, especially weeds, that can be used to make LEAFU, especially those that might be available year round? And this person's specifically wondering about couch grass. You might know about that, David, but also nettles, hawthorn, blackberry leaves, dandelion, plankton. And they're also asking, is it true you shouldn't use nettles after they've flowered? So we've got a big question there. So first of all, is there a list of edible leaves, particularly weeds, that can be safely used to make LEAFU?
I'm sure we could put one together with all the literature that's around. Because, and also John, I think, I don't know, did you mention David Kennedy in the States has done a lot. He's got an organization called Leaf for Life. He's actually sort of retiring a bit now, but I think probably people are taking on his work. And he has produced a couple of publications showing how to make it leaf concentrate on a domestic scale using just instruments and tools that you'd have in any kitchen. Not as efficient as Grace's, I'm sure. But yeah, so I think we could probably John may have given you the information about David's work, but he has a lot of lists, I think, of various types of clover and various types of weeds. And obviously, if Ella was here, she could tell you about nettles, because Michael Cole, that was his main crop for the leaf curd that he produced, the leaf food that he produced. And he also mixed it with tofu, actually, sometimes. I think that's how he first called it LEAFU. But the nettle seemed to, I don't know about the flowering. It would make sense not to use it after flowering in terms of, or at least that the protein content would reduce after flowering. But I'm not sure if it's not possible to use them.
There are, I suppose I'd say there are some things that are, I would say the place to start, I guess, is just things that are non-toxic, that we know that you can eat anyway. Now, because of the concentration of things, and there are certain things to sort of additional considerations. But as well as the toxicity of things, it's like the processing of leaves and whether. So I remember trying to make leaf concentrate from lettuce leaves once, which is a complete disaster because they didn't have the structure, the strength, and it turned into a horrible frothy mush, and it was just horrible. So as well as, so sometimes the things that's actually selected when you find whether the leaf is toxic or not is actually, or whether it's just as well as the protein production, it's whether you can actually process it to extract the leaf concentrate. So there are other considerations. Yep.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just jump in quickly. I think in terms of the toxicity of leaves, I know that an organization called ORFED, they are looking into an automated determination of edibility of leaves. So they are trying to develop a non-targeted screening for toxins in leaves. And I think their vision is to have, in the end, kind of like a database of what leaves what can be edible and non-toxic. And I think one other thing to mention is that even if leaves are toxic in their raw form, sometimes when they are boiled or subjected to heat, then that will remove its toxicity.
No, that's right, Grace. And one of the things about that also with the leaf concentrate processing, because there's a lot of, you remove most of the water soluble things. So some of the toxins there are water soluble and they get extracted during the process. So yes, you're absolutely very good point.
Just following on from that, just as maybe a slight safety tip, I would be slightly concerned about using potato leaves and tomato leaves, just in case, because of the alkaloids there. And you're right, I mean, it might obviously be washed out, but I wouldn't necessarily take the risk at this point, unless you're absolutely sure.
I think if the literature does sort of like lucerne, cowpea.
It's alfalfa, isn't it? Yeah.
Sorry?
Alfalfa is lucerne, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. Cowpea, like David's experimenting things. So we can look into, you can put together, as Jen said, a list of things that have been found to be non-toxic and also good leaf concentrate producers. So that wouldn't, if someone's interested, that's something we could put together quite quickly, I think.
Yeah, I think that might be useful. And nettle, of course, is a great one. And
Nettle's great. Yes.
Yeah.
It
and
also has got a nice taste. I mean, that's the other. Sorry, that's what we haven't talked about either. Like nettle has a much more gentler taste than, say, lucerne, which is quite bitter. I don't know about the clover, David. Have you done? And Grace, I suppose that's something that you'll be looking into as well, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the grass and clover have a slightly bitter taste to them. That's one of the things I'm sort of working on at the moment, is to try and take out some of that taste or reduce that some amount of taste, the taste that's there. Just on that again, people asking about what they can use for plants. I mean, I cut my grass, the lawn last week, and I ate the protein yesterday from the grass and the clover and the lawn. And it still has a slight tinge of a taste to it, but it's getting better.
Yeah, and that was a question we had. How about the taste? So it might be a bit of a Marmite type of thing. It can taste a bit like you've just licked the inside of your lawnmower after cutting the grass. But but I know David's been working on that, and we've tried the white clover LEAFU, we've eaten that, and the nettle LEAFU and other weeds. And
but also it's worth thinking that you don't generally eat it spoonful by spoonful.
No.
It's so high in nutrients that actually you add it to think it's a supplement, really, isn't it? Generally, I'd say. And so if there is a little bit of a bitter taste, it often gets covered over by the other ingredients that you're using.
I had the grass LEAFU in a bolognese sauce.
No, lovely.
Lovely. It's fine.
Yeah, I've also had LEAFU mixed in with my pasta sauce. Also making my own protein balls mixed with dates and cocoa powder, and that tastes really nice.
Yeah.
Well,
Fantastic.
And dried. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Jenny.
I was just going to say that was quite often dried, and Michael used to dry it, and we could often obtain it dried, and John has done so from the organisation in France that's making it, and you can. What Michael used to do, which was really lovely, and I think it's such an easy way to do it. You'd have it in a salt shaker, and it's you just shake it over your salad or your, on top of a pasta dish or something, and you've got instant improvement in your nutrient content. But it's so easy to use. Yeah.
I think following from Jenny, I think vegans we're used to adding a sprinkle of nutritional yeast on top of our meals, or some hemp seed, so it's pretty easy to incorporate into our meals.
Brilliant.
Yeah, thank you. And I think a couple of hours in the oven, isn't it, David, at about 80 degrees, a very low temperature will dry the LEAFU at home if you're making it at home. Yeah, and we've had a question also about how to use it in cooking. Maybe we could pop up a couple of photos, Dan, of some of my culinary attempts, a couple of the loaves I've made. You can bung it in anything really. I've made a lentil and LEAFU loaf. LEAFU nut roast, so that's garnished with purple dead nettles, so that's got LEAFU in it. And I think we have a lentil and LEAFU roast as well. Maybe there it is. Garnished with mint. So that one there, lentil and LEAFU loaf, that was made with all British ingredients, British lentils as well from Hodnadods. So that one featured on our Facebook page, Eat British Plants for a Year, which is something we're doing at Stock Free Farming, is trying to only eat British for a year. So lots of ways to use LEAFU in cooking. Okay, next question. How does the protein content of LEAFU compare to animal-based proteins? And I think we've got a slide on this one. How does the protein content compare? Dan, I think we've got a wee chart back there that David maybe put together. Oh, not that one. It's like a table, maybe not. Well, while Dan's finding it, can we, do we know off the top of our head sort of how the protein content compares to beef steak? I've read that, LEAFU protein, we're looking at 48 to 50% protein content, whereas beef steak comes in at around 31%, doesn't it? So it's a much higher protein content than beef. And also you get so much more protein per hectare. I don't know if you recall the figure off the top of your head, David, but so much more protein per hectare when you bake it directly.
I don't have it off the top of my head, but I have a handy sheet beside me here.
Okay, there you go. Read it off the sheet, because Dan's not finding that slide for some reason.
On the grass clover type system we're working on, we're getting 333 kilograms per hectare of protein from fields. When you're harvesting peas, you get 294 kilograms per hectare of protein, so it's actually higher than peas. Now, I would think, I don't have the sort of comparison with beef or milk, but it would be around, it would be about a tenth of that. It would be around about 45 or about 30 kilograms per hectare from beef or from milk.
Yeah, so LEAFU tops all of those then, doesn't it? Is a much higher, cleaner source, and also we get so much more per hectare when we make LEAFU rather than when we farm animals. So now we have, how can I make LEAFU at home? So I think we have a handy dandy video. Let's see if we can bring it up, of me making nettle LEAFU in my kitchen. We saw it a few minutes ago, so come in, Dan. Really, it is that simple, folks.
It
It's so easy. I think, for me anyway, the difficult part is the quantity that you have to harvest if you're harvesting by hand. It's quite labor intensive, and we have a question about that. Harvesting by hand is quite labor intensive given the large quantities of leaves needed. What are some ways, possibly machinery, to do this more efficiently? I'm not sure how Ella harvests the nettles. Do you know, Jenny or John?
I think she uses a scythe.
Yeah, that's what I've done when I've been down there. I've used a scythe.
I think it is quite intensive. And Michael was extremely tall and extremely strong, so I think it was not such a big deal for him. But I'm not sure, what did they do in India and Nicaragua and places, John?
In Nicaragua, they just used to go around with the machete, and I'm not sure in France where they harvest massive lucerne. I don't know what they use for the collection, actually for the chopping. They go around with huge or big JCB type things to load them into the factories, but I'm not sure. I mean, David, what do you use when you have a lot of clover to harvest?
Well, I mean, we're talking about normal agricultural land, pasture land. So it's just normal harvesting equipment, which they would use normally for making silage. You would use for that purpose.
Okay.
And the system is now called cut and carry, where they actually cut the grass, don't make it to silage, they just take it straight to the cattle in the shed. Now that's perfect for picking up the grass and putting it into a processing system. So that would be the way you go about it. So in the larger scale, the equipment's all there, actually.
Right.
And I go back to what I was saying before, you can cut the grass in your back garden, and you can use that.
Yeah, I mean, so farmers are busy weeding and getting rid of their weeds, whereas we can eat them to beat them, as they say, right? We're eating our weeds. So I missed a question here, coming back to potentially things that might be harmful. Can we use things like dock and sorrel? Do the oxalates go out of the way? No, WHEY, that is. Or do they stay with the protein portion? I know a lot of greens aren't used because of high oxalates, including spinach, chard, beet tops, and sea beet. So any comments on the oxalates? Yeah. Anybody have any idea whether that goes out with the heating process or whether, I'm not sure.
They may come out, they may get washed out from the actual washing process when you take off the water, when the protein separates out. I would say you'd have to be maybe just a bit careful just in case. I suspect also, I don't know if you know, Jenny, if I know Bill Perry did some work on this, actually looked at oxalates. So there may be something.
Okay, well, I'll find the paper because we have got a big library.
But it is a general point.
That's fine.
Yeah,
it does ring a bell actually when you were saying it, but I'll look into that and then maybe we can let you all know. Yeah,
okay. Moving along, what have been the successes and failures and some of the main obstacles in attempting to bring LEAFU to the global table? We sort of alluded to those earlier, but given that this is such a wonder food, why is it not happening?
That's a good question. There's the successes. There's lots of empirical evidence of its nutritional value and acceptability. I was working on the project in Nicaragua, and the doctor that we were working with, when we had some problems with supply, she said she used to come up and she came up to us and she said, the women are asking when we, so when we're going to get some more, because my baby will get fat. So, and I remember my dad told a story of when they were doing some stuff in Egypt about the doctors saying, I don't actually need to do any tests or anything because the mothers are complaining that their children are becoming cheeky. and that was his indication that actually it was working very well. So yeah, I think there's lots of empirical evidence. Strange has been like as a source of let's see how to put this. Yeah, as a natural source of iron, protein, and vitamin A. If it's something you can produce in country, then and people can produce locally, then that doesn't really help pharmaceutical companies. And certainly when there was attempts to prove its certain nutritional value, there's been a bit of a concerted effort because if people against it, because if you can get it locally, you don't need to buy the tablets. So that's been one of the obstacles. But really, the biggest obstacle, I think, has been the sort of getting a medium scale sort of economic model. Like in France, there's in Champagne a collection of agricultural co-ops that produce leaf concentrate, but it's mainly as a byproduct, as when they harvest lucerne and they dry it, and then it's all very much integrated, that sort of feed stuff, the dried feed, with sort of milk production. And so there's and so the leaf concentrate is a byproduct rather than the main thing. Now, when I think the various charities, Find Your Feet, that somebody in the chat mentioned that VegFam supported some years ago, and and some successor organisations in the States have managed to sort of have some economic models, but for a short time and not a sustainable model. So I think that's the problem, that it seems to be all right if you make it small scale domestically, it's okay, there's no need for it to be sustainable. And then if there's a very large, not economic rather, and if you do it on a very large scale, and the way France Lucerne is doing it, then there are other models. But to do an intermediate scale thing, and certainly with the vegan side of things where you don't integrate it with the dairy crops, that's something that we haven't explored yet. And certainly it's an avenue to look at, but I'd say it's an avenue, yes, to be explored.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anything else on the obstacles? Oh, Grace, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in my opinion, one obstacle is simply just awareness. I personally didn't know about leaf protein concentrate until this year. I think that's the case for many people as well. They just simply don't know that it's possible to make leaf protein concentrate from, weeds, leaves, and other sources. So I think awareness is one big thing that we have to overcome. In terms of consumer acceptance, I think that's fine. I did a quick market research survey to my classmates, and everyone was really, really interested in leaf protein concentrate and making it from even food offcuts from the kitchen. So yeah, that's why I think it's really great that we have this panel here tonight with the Vegan Organic Network to kind of raise awareness to everyone who might be interested.
Yeah, fantastic.
I think I agree. It's totally about, well, not totally, as John said, I think it's about investment, awareness, and then investment. And up till now, it's been very difficult to get enough awareness by the right people in order to get enough investment to be able to develop it on any scale. And it just seems almost impossible that can be the case when you know how obviously good a product it is, and how obviously simple as well, really. And if you can make tofu, which is, tofu is so well accepted and pretty much the same process as what we do when we're making leaf curd. So if that can be done on scale, then why can't leaf curd? And I think with more and more green foods are being accepted. At one point, I think in the 70s and 80s, when it was, I think Veg Fam was great, and I remember, I can't remember his name now, but I remember the council member from Veg Fam, lovely guy, and he was very passionate about it. But I think the movement for vegetarianism, veganism wasn't there as strongly as it is now. So in a sense, maybe LEAFU's time has come, because it feels like nobody's worried about green food anymore, whereas maybe in the 70s and 80s it was a really niche thing. Now I have a feeling if it gets the right kind of awareness, as Grace said, and the investment that will allow the intermediate scale production, then it could, well, it just needs that little bit more interest, and maybe a few celebrities to understand how important it is.
Yeah, celebrities always help, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess one problem, David and we in collaborating with David in some ways have encountered with the white clover LEAFU and the grass LEAFU is because these are not known foods with a history of being eaten by humans. They have to pass through the Food Standards Authority. And so this is, a lengthy process. It's a costly process, especially if you're looking at not just white clover, but the common grasses that might be in the white clover. Each one of these grasses has to be approved by the Food Standards Authority to be classed as a novel food and be approved. So that's one obstacle that we've encountered with nettles are fine. I mean, nettles are a known food, but white clover and grass is not known to be consumed by humans. There's no history of it. So, there was a question for David. It's sort of connected to this. In your consultancy role with SRUC, David, you must come into contact with livestock farmers. What do they think of grass and clover protein extract as a concept?
Yeah, it's quite interesting because obviously in Scotland there's a big grassland country and big animal production, a lot of animal production in Scotland. I do, as part of my job, give talks to farmers and dairy farmers and beef farmers, and usually it's just about general grassland management. But one of the issues, usually when I am talking, I do mention that some of the work we're doing on extracting protein from grass and clover directly without animals, I tend to sort of keep it fairly low key. But generally, people are quite interested. And there was one occasion up in Huntly, up in northeast Scotland, we were talking to, it was a farm where there was a beef farm that had been in the family for 3 generations. And I mentioned this about looking at protein and other materials from grass and clover. And I mentioned it. And afterwards, I left the meeting, and actually the farmer, who's the 3rd generation farmer there, beef farmer, came up to me and said, "We'll have to do this. This is the future." Because really, they say there's no future in beef farming, and we're going to have to look for alternatives from grass and clover. If it's the only thing that can grow there, we need to look at other alternatives there. So there is actually, it's surprising actually, just how there is quite a lot of acceptability. And within SRUC, within the consultancy service and the research side, there is a lot of interest in this, because people see that we do need alternative outputs from grassland.
Now, that's fantastic news, David. I hope you'll introduce us to that farmer, but that's encouraging. That's encouraging to know that farmers themselves are acknowledging that beef doesn't have a future because of the environmental impact, and we should be looking at alternatives. That's encouraging to know. We've had quite a few questions in the chat, Dan, but maybe we could just show some of the other photos that John sent us from work overseas of LEAFU being processed and cooked, and the scale of the operation in France as well, I think. Do you have those photos? Yeah, John, do you want to tell us what we're looking at? And
okay, this is in Mexico, and this is coagulation. So like it's just a big bath of Lisa and the ladies sort of just keeping it stirring very slightly, trying not to break up the curd. So yeah, if it boils too much, you get lost. So you need to just try and raise it, not bubble it too much, so that it just, and then you can scrape it off, because otherwise it all sort of gets mixed up into the whey. So that's a coagulation point.
We got another picture, Dan. Keep going. Oh, that's my LEAFU. Okay.
That's yours.
Finished product. Tell us what this is, John and Jenny.
This is a paper that the FAO in, I think, 2010 or 11 produced a book called Combating Micronutrient Deficiencies, and looking particularly at food-based approach. And we were invited to submit a chapter. This is an organization called APEF, which is a French leaf concentrate charity that runs feeding programs and looking at sustainable sustainable sort of leaf concentration production in sorry, I was just having a look at a chat question that popped up in front of me, distracted me. Thing about trees, I'll just say briefly, I think what people have found is that by the time the leaves get into the trees and they are quite sort of dry, I haven't dried them, but this is what I sort of recollect from having chats with people before, so they're not really juicy enough, but that's only my recollection. I haven't used them, and I think it would depend. So that's as far as I know, that's what I believe. So this book, yes, if you look at the chapter, and that's something that I can circulate or I can put through Dan for the chapter on leaf concentrate, which basically provides, I think, a pretty good summary of work done and the history and things, avenues to go, as it was about 10, 12 years ago is where we were thinking. So that was it. What that book was.
Yeah, fantastic. It's a great article. So it'd be great to share that, John, with Dan. Yeah, any other photos that we haven't seen yet, Dan? I think we've got a few more of folks. That's the paper right there. This is the chapter. Yeah. Okay. Next. And we've got a photo in there of huge mounds of LEAFU. I think this will be from France, is it, John? The big, at scale photographs.
Probably, yes, there is sort of industrial production of, they sort of using lucerne or alfalfa, and they take several tons an hour, 150 tons an hour up to that, of leaves, lucerne, process it, mash it up, squeeze out the juice, this standard leaf concentrate process. And they have big screw presses and centrifuges to take out the juice, and they coagulate by injecting steam, and then have sort of fluidized beds to dry the curd. And so it's a big industrial process, and the leaf concentrate, most of it is produced for animal feed, actually, or a combination. Also, leaf concentrate is used as a colorant as well for egg yolks in certain parts of the world, and their human grade production is a very small amount of their overall agricultural stuff. But yes, there are big mounds. The picture hasn't come up yet, but
that's okay. We can imagine a mountain of LEAFU. Yeah, I think there was a few questions in the chat, Dan. I don't know if there's any good ones that you want to bring back. We can just, if folks have time to stick around for maybe 10 more minutes, we can pop up some of those questions. Can everybody see that? Awkward question. Sorry. The theory is we shouldn't need to wipe and wipe and wipe. I eat lots of wild weeds. I barely need to wipe now. Okay, I'm getting the point of this. I do eat meat occasionally, though, when I feel run down. So I think the question is, does eating weeds reduce the need to wipe? Who wants to take that one? Dan would pick that one, wouldn't he? Thanks, Dan.
I'm certainly not aware of any research on this.
Oh, I could say that you do get green poo if you
Green
eat a
poo,
lot of it.
okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. Green poo. Okay, next. If cutting grass in fields and gardens or any other leaf, are there precautions needed to remove contamination, animal excretions, urine, dirt? Yeah, David, how do you, when you do a big sample from a field, how do you sort of clean it and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, normally there's agricultural fields that they're just down to grass or clover. If it's my back lawn, make sure it's fairly clean anyway. I think in any process you would, I mean, you'd want to make sure it's fairly clean anyway. And you would want to make sure there's not a lot of animals wandering through the grass area. It would have to be separate from any animal production. But the first thing in any stage, in actually any process, you would wash the material anyway before that goes through the process. So I don't think, with proper care and that, it shouldn't really be an issue.
Great, thank you. Yeah. I heard nettle seeds contain more protein than leaves. Do you include seeds in the processing of LEAFU?
What I think the thing about that is that the seeds maybe is that digestible protein. So normally, if we just eat leaves on their own, we won't get much protein from them. That's the point. Whereas from eating nettle seeds, we might get more because our digestive systems can manage that. But by processing the leaves, in that way we can get more protein probably than, I don't know if more than seeds, but at least we would get more than just simply eating the leaves themselves. Does that, yeah?
Yeah, I think, when I've made it, I've bunged in the seeds and the leaves.
Oh, you have?
And
yeah.
I think I got lazy last time and put the stalks in as well, because it's
Yeah.
a bit of a faff. It's a bit of a faff stripping the leaves off the stalk. So I think I just bunged the whole thing in. So yeah, I don't know what Ella does, but it would be interesting to find out. But yeah.
I suppose it depends on what you're saying by the more protein than leaves, because the energy comes to the leaves, and then basically when the seeds are produced, then that's when the energy or the protein content and the nutritional content of the leaf decreases. So I suppose, the idea is an energy is lost in producing those nutritional content. So while it may be that, I suppose, per leaf, I think the thing about leaf concentrate is you're looking at a generation of nutrients per hectare or something like that. And it's, so I think, even though that all the nutrients get concentrated in the seeds, and then they get further concentrated when you go to animals and things, so each way down the line. But the point is, I suppose, there are also losses in that process. So if you take them as early as possible, so your nutrient production per area, if you take them from the leaves, this is, as I understand things, should be higher from doing it from leaves. So you have, if you're looking on a macro scale rather than just on the small individual scale. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody, anything to add to that? So we have talked about Find Your Feet. In the 80s, the Veg Farm charity Find Your Feet, and Narissa was involved with that, wasn't she? Promoting leaf protein to feed the hungry without exploiting animals. Any idea why it's still not widely used or even known about? And you talked about that, Jenny.
Yeah, I think that's it. Find
Frieden Howard.
That's it, Frieden. Yes. Frieden Howard was the council member who I think he founded Veg Farm, actually.
Right. No, they were really supportive, but I don't know what's happened. Because Find Your Feet stopped.
I think the point is that Find Your Feet, stopped when Carol. So Narissa Martin, who couldn't be here tonight, she's the same generation as John and I, and she was the daughter of Carol Martin, who started Find Your Feet, the charity that really supported leaf curd production and did all these trials abroad. So Find Your Feet had various people on its council, and one of them was VegFam, and they were a great supporter, put lots of money into it. Why is it not yet widely used? I think it's all those things we talked about, the obstacles, that for some reason it just didn't capture the public imagination, the word didn't get through. I mean, even at that time, I remember in the 70s, Find Your Feet was talking to the Food and Agriculture Organization, but they just didn't get anywhere. So it took till 2011 to get them to listen, really. So, and now, but yeah, so that's basically it. I think that's, yeah.
Can I just say, before we go on to the next question, just following on from that, I think one of the other issues, and as John has mentioned about the actual history of the protein extraction, one of the other issues was that soya protein started coming onto the market, and relatively cheaply, and it's still relatively cheap. And in many respects, one of the main barriers to grass or plant or leaf-derived protein becoming economically viable is that soya protein is still relatively cheap, and to compete with that is quite difficult. Having said that, there's so much concern now about the environmental damage caused by soya protein that there is a lot of interest now. I mean, we're talking tonight about in UK and South America, etc. In Northern Europe now, there's many countries in Northern Europe that are looking at this as well, primarily because of the environmental impact of importing soya from South America. So there is again, there's an opportunity here and now to actually really push this for environmental reasons. And what we're trying to do at SRUC is to try and make it more economically viable to do this as well at the same time.
Yeah, fantastic.
Excellent.
Brilliant.
So we have a question about freezing it. Can you store the protein balls? I'm not sure if that's a reference to the protein balls you made, Grace, or just LEAFU in general. Can you freeze it?
Yeah, I think you can definitely freeze it, and it will help preserve the protein nutrients. As I believe, if you make it fresh, then I think in 3 to 5 days you should consume it. But I think if you dry it or if you freeze it, or any other preservation with sugar, etc., then I think it lasts a lot longer.
Mm-hmm. And David, you've frozen your samples, haven't you?
Yeah, that's just a normal storage method. Often we have them analysed, and before we send them off for analysis, we'll freeze them, and it's fine, absolutely fine.
We used to make a syrup, a lemon syrup, which was, just the sugar and leaf concentrate and the lemon juice, which also helped the absorption of iron. So the lemon juice, so it was, and that preserved very well and made quite a refreshing syrup drink thing. So,
oh, great! What a good idea! Yeah. Somebody's asking about using leaves, from vegetables like kale, broccoli, cabbage, outer leaves. You had mentioned lettuce wasn't great, John, but what about some of these other veggies?
Haven't tried any of those. I don't know. Yes, in principle, I suppose it would depend on the structure of the leaves, how they process, and how old they are. And so the other considerations that Grace mentioned and David mentioned. So, yeah, I'm going to try it. I don't know is a simple answer, but I'm sure if I had looked through the things, we could find it. And Grace, sorry, go on.
Yeah, about that, I think I read in a journal that only about 20 to 50% of the total biomass of vegetables such as broccoli, carrots, beetroot, and cabbage are harvested and sold as food. So if we're thinking about agricultural side streams and utilizing those, I think it's a great opportunity, especially because when you look at supermarkets and when they package food, they're cutting off like the outer leaves maybe, but they can definitely be used for leaf protein concentrate.
Yeah, absolutely. Like turnip greens, the leaves from peas and beans, even rape leaves, which are brassica. There's many many things. And then it's worth mentioning that in the Netherlands, the Kosen beet factory is making LEAFU at scale from the leaves of sugar beet. And that's, they've got a video online, but the Kosen beet factory in Netherlands uses sugar beet leaves, which is fantastic. And we do grow sugar beet, of course, down south in this country. Next question. David's already talked about eating his lawnmower. So,
sorry, because the grass is already chopped up as well for processing. But I'd make sure it's clean. I'd make sure the lawn's clean. I'd also give the grass a bit of a wash before you actually process it. But yes, no reason why not.
Yeah, I'm glad somebody's asked this last question, because I would like to know about Grace's domestic leaf protein concentration extraction device and what you're planning to do with it, Grace. You know, so go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the question. At the moment, I'm in the prototyping stage. So actually, John's been helping me quite a lot with consulting me about the engineering and everything. The idea is, having a small scale protein extraction device for leaves. It can be from, from offcuts from your kitchen. It can be from forage materials. It can be from your garden, leaves from your garden. So in terms of the input, that's the idea. And I'm just trying to make a more efficient method. And you can make it at home, but in terms of the stages, having an all-in-one device, as well as bringing in more control for yield efficiency, such as temperature control. So if you think if 80 degrees is the optimal temperature, but when you're boiling it, when you're making it at home at the moment and you're boiling it on top of your stove, you might not have control of temperature, and at higher temperatures that it can lead to protein degradation. So, trying to optimize yield in that way and creating more efficient device for that.
Well, it sounds fantastic, Grace. I can't wait till we can see the finished product, and I hope it will be affordable so we can all buy one for use at home. It'd be wonderful. Yeah. And are there any more questions, Dan? Are we at the end here? I think we're probably done. Does anybody have any final comments, words of wisdom? This has been so interesting tonight. Anybody have any final comments? Well, I think if you've enjoyed, sorry, John, go ahead.
Exciting. I just think it's very exciting. Grace, I think it's been brilliant to have chatting. She brought some really, innovative thinking to things, which I think is great. And David, you're doing a lot of stuff that I didn't know about. So all the stuff you were saying certainly is talking about the sort of Northern Europe involvement is very, very encouraging and exciting. And I think, Jen, you're right. It is, fingers crossed, we are at the right time. And yeah, maybe the world is receptive to this now at last. It's really good.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, somebody just asked if the little video, Dan, if you could share that on the Von page or something so that people can have a go at making it with their blender and the stovetop, which until Grace's device is launched, that's probably what we're going to have to do in our kitchens. But anyway, thanks everybody tonight. Wonderful to get together. Thanks for all your input. Thanks everybody for watching, and see you at the next Gardener's Question Time.
Okay, bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.